Welcome to Mastery TV, our efforts to pull back the curtain at the Mastery School of Hawken and dig into issues around teaching, learning, and the way forward. I'm Sam Bowen, member of the founding class of 2023. In today's episode, hear from the director of the Mastery School, Julia Griffin, founding faculty, Janae Peters and Katie Zielinski, my fellow student Haley, as well as myself, as we unpack Rigor, sharing stories about the Mastery School's academic program and how we find motivation in the absence of grades.
I'm Janae Peters. I'm one of the founding faculty here at the Mastery School. And as Raisa said, today we're going to talk about rigor and we're going to talk about motivation. All the things that when you're opening a new school that doesn't have grades that everyone worries about. Will my child be challenged? Will my child learn anything? Will they learn how to do hard things? And so we're going to spend some time today talking about that both from the faculty side and from the student side, and hopefully get some input from those of you who are watching just to see what we can see about what people are thinking about our academic programming now. Before we get started, I would love for our panel to introduce ourselves, and I think if we go this way, that seems reasonable to me. All right, so I'll pass it on to my dear colleague.
Hi, my name is Katie Zielinski. My background's in architecture and design. I'm one of the founding faculty members here at the Mastery School. I think I'll pass it.
That's great. Hi, everybody. I'm Julia Griffin, and I am the director of the Mastery School.
Hi, I am Haley Eldridge, and I am a founding student, and I am a freshman here at the Mastery School.
I'm Sam Bowen. I'm also a founding student. I'm currently a junior.
All right, thanks everyone. So I think what really started this session off was a conversation that Katie, Raisa, and our colleague Julia Hodges and I were having on the porch during lunch one day, where I'll say we were a little frustrated by people saying that the school isn't rigorous and all those things, or just even that suggestion. And part of it is all of us coming from our different walks of life, having taught in traditional schools, having taught in schools that are considered whatever, elite, high-powered, all those things, and who teach in disciplines that are traditionally considered rigorous, see what we're doing here at the Mastery School as a big time improvement upon what anyone has known to be rigorous, and an improvement upon how to think about student motivation in the learning process as well. And so we have some good energy around that, around thinking about what that means here at the Mastery School. And this program is an attempt to recreate that kind of energy into a session. I think often when we hear the term academic rigor, we hear that when people talk about that teacher that they had in high school who was really mean and held them to a high standard, and they had to work so hard to get that B+ or A-, and they're forever proud of it because they know that getting that grade from that person meant something. And I think also when people talk about rigor, they think about sleepless nights or pulling all-nighters and working on something so long, turning in that paper, and it was me too. And we think differently about that, or we think about it, I think actually in the truest sense of a term that has become very jargonized in education. And I like to think about rigor as really causing people to rethink, reflect, and expand upon things that they have previously believed to be true. But when we think about rigor, we think about science courses, right? We think about that hard canonical text that we had to write that essay on, or maths, all the maths, BC Calc. Like you hear that all the time in like a salutatorian or valedictorian speech that's really about achievement in a particular course of study that has been known over time to be hard or true. And we think bigger about that. But before we get started, just so I know that I'm not talking wild over here, I'm wondering if y'all will indulge us and in the chat put in some definitions of rigor that you all have so that we can engage those. And while folks are doing that, which I really hope you do, Maybe the folks around here can talk a bit about your experiences with the term rigor, or even experiences thinking about what challenging work means for people in different walks of life.
Yeah, I can start. My background, like I mentioned, is in architecture, and I think one of the ways that I've always engaged with rigor was thinking about the design process as being rigorous. And what that always meant to me was this like curious exploration into trying to find the best solution to something, and the not stopping until you found like something beautiful that works. And I think that to me, what we do here at the Mastery School aligns much more closely to that definition of rigor than staying up all night to do pages and pages of homework because your teacher assigned it.
I can go next. I have had many rigorous courses, like for me at least, because I was always in honors classes because I was in a public school. That was how they separated all of the grades into sections of honors and normal people, I guess. And so rigorous to me really is when you work hard at something, not like just trying to achieve anything. It's just when you really work hard at something and you just want to get better at it. And I've definitely had that in math, especially because I've always loved math and it's always been rigorous. I'm going to say rigorous a lot. Yeah. And I just wanted to keep at it and keep going forward, even when it really got hard, especially in honors courses. And that is what it means to me, at least.
When I think about rigor, like I sort of had like this rooted notion of rigor that I feel, and I felt before coming to the master's school, I sort of had this, the classes I worked hard at weren't necessarily classes I got the best grade at, and like the classes that I was like, naturally talented at were like the ones that I worked less hard at and still got good grades. So like to me, like rigor is like sort of this shifting thing from like this idea of like outcome based rewards and sort of like the idea that you give a certain amount of work and then you'll get a certain rating on it, and that's like the amount of rigor you put in, which for me at least wasn't true. And so now like it's shifting. It's like not one thing or another, but for me it's more about currently being able to work through things and how things change and how you think about the issue, and if you hit a barrier, what are you going to do next? So it's less of like outcome dependent and more on like the next step. It's dependent on the next step, and that's like my current definition of rigor. I would say is the ability to keep going with a project or an idea or anything that you feel stuck on, and that you need to work through.
Oh, we have a chat definition of rigor. So this one says that one view of rigor is how closely a faculty member holds students accountable to the course learning outcomes and the details associated with these outcomes. And I think the piece I love about that is that inclusion of the faculty member relationship in learning. And we, I think so many of our programs and methodologies really work to center that, or to remind students that even independent work can be in connection to or in relationship with other folks who are learning in the community, including adults or faculty learners too. And so I love thinking about the role of the faculty member in supporting the process of challenging learning in this too. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it on to Julia Griffin.
Thank you. Thanks so much today. Yeah, I'll chime in here and add to these super reflections on rigor that I so appreciate. And I think a lot about. I think when I talk to people about rigor and I talk to people about the school, what I most often hear is very much like what Janae was describing in the introduction. And this is this idea that that there has to be suffering, and also that if there is suffering, if you are suffering, then you must be learning. And I would challenge both of those things. There's so many examples that I can draw from in my own life and in, many years of working with students. But one of the ones I think of is a student who was part of an intensive that Scott Looney, the head of school at Hawken, and I taught in the years before we opened the Mastery School. It was called Designing the Ideal High School. And there were a group of Hawken seniors who helped us in the design process of the Mastery School. And there was one student, a young woman, a senior, very successful, very driven student who in the course of this intensive, as we were talking about and unpacking these ideas about learning and grades, shared at one point, she's like, I am taking classes and getting A's in classes right now, and I have no idea what they're about. Like, I don't understand, I don't know what they are, but I've figured out how to play the game. Okay, I really like that was your reaction, Haley.
Okay, see, I've definitely had those experiences where I have no clue what I'm doing at any point in time. And I'm just going through the motions, and I somehow know the answers to the tests that they were giving me, or the quizzes, just like, surprise, we're gonna give you a quiz right now. And I'm just like, I have no clue how I'm getting these answers, but I am. And I was always getting A's in those sorts of classes. And I was just like, right after the year ended, I had no idea what I had just learned. I was just like, what was that history class about again?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of surprisingly common. And it makes me think of what you were saying too, Sam, really, in a lot of ways. And then I think about what you were just saying, Haley, too, about all the classes that, one might suffer through, and then it ends and you think, well, thank goodness that's over, and I never have to think about that again. And that's not what education should be about, right? Like, we want it to be a springboard. We want it to be something that you come out of it and you're thinking about what you want to do next, what you want to learn next, and not just like, oh my goodness, I lived to tell the tale and now I'm done. So, we don't use the word rigor a lot. Like, what we do, the words we do use, I think, the two that come to mind for me are depth and growth. We do talk a lot about depth, I think, about learning something to depth. And I think it's also easy when you sort of get a superficial look at a school like this, at a school that's built around projects, to feel like it's probably kind of shallow. It's probably, they're doing a project, they're making a prototype, and then they're done. And I think what we who are on the inside experience in all the ways that you all were talking about is know that it's actually the kind of learning that you get to do in the course of a project is all about depth. It's not the kind of shallow breadth that you get when you are learning a series of topics that somebody introduces you to, or not even learning. You're hearing about a series of topics that somebody introduces you to, and it could be really specific, but there is depth and you have to actually understand it if you're going to apply it and use it in some kind of context. So I think a lot about depth. And then I think about growth and the idea that we define growth as something that happens when we learn new things, whatever those things may be. And this is a school that's organized entirely around how we help maximize individual growth. So that's really what I think about. Go ahead.
I just want to add, there was another rigor definition that I think aligns a bit with what you just finished saying, Julia. And this one says, I think it means to do something very thoroughly, or to do it so very fully, so it's pristine. And that thorough as a connection to depth, not just breadth, but to depth is one that I just wanted to make sure we pointed out here.
I also wanted to add that, reminding of the conversation that we had that started this whole thing. One of the things that started that conversation was a student actually coming to us and saying, remember that challenge we did way back last year? I still think about that every day and I wish I could redo it. And I think of all these ways that I would do it better and do it differently. And I think that speaks to being the opposite of I leave the class, it's done, and I've moved on, that students are thinking about these things all the time and how they could do them better now that they have more tools and that they've had more growth. And I think that we think of that as being, rigorous at least.
Absolutely. I don't know what we're calling each other here. Ms. Katie, Ms. Zielinski. So as you think about what you just offered, right? The incentive in that sense being the maybe not the collaboration per se, but the work that was done during a challenge. Why do you think in our program where we don't have grades, like how does it work that the motivator isn't or can't or shouldn't be the grade?
Yeah.
Go for it, Sam.
This is one of my favorite things about the mastery school. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So one of my favorite things is the motivation and like what causes me to want to do work. Because before it was like sort of this idea of anxiety about grades and wanting to impress your teacher, which was not necessarily the healthiest form for a lot of people, myself included. The biggest shift, like this is like black and white, like the biggest shift from like my previous schooling to this is like why you want to do the work. And now why I want to do the work is because it's real work and it's going to affect people. So in a lot of situations when you're doing like a challenge that like you're working with a challenge partner, you have to do good work because this work is going to be implemented to the fullest of its extent if it's good work. So, you want to be able to say, I helped this person come up with a new strategy for addressing illegal dumping in their streets, or I want to be able to say that I helped these people or this group of people with their campaign for mayor or something like that. Like those are both examples that I worked on, and it's black and white because the reason I do the work is because I want to see the work succeed and because I have been invested in the ways that I've been involved in it and I've invested in the project. And it's not at all about like grades or impressing someone. It's completely different.
Yeah, I think kind of stole the words from my mouth, but from my perspective as a teacher, we're crafting these learning experiences so that hopefully they do matter that much. Since you mentioned the challenge with the mayoral candidate, we had Justin Bibb as one of our challenge partners last year, and like imagine the motivation that you get that you have to in 3 weeks present to someone who's running for mayor and share with him your ideas, and he cares about what you say. And then he went on to become the mayor, and now you have on your the things you've done on your resume, you have that you presented to the mayor of Cleveland, and he cared about what you said. And also like that was the day you did it. You did not have an extension. You did not have, if you got sick, you missed it. And we could talk about it. And it's not like that was the only moment of work of those 3 weeks leading up to it. But that's a real thing. And it's a real motivator.
I'm going to throw in this moment, one of my favorite pieces of neuroscience, favorite neuroscience sort of quotations. Doris Korda, who is really one of the founders of the school, often likes to say that this is the school that you would build if you actually cared about what neuroscience tells us about how people learn things. Weirdly, that is not actually a factor in the design of traditional schools, which have been around for a long time, and we've learned a lot about the brain. But there's a cognitive scientist named Mary Helen Immordino Yang, who wrote in a very memorable phrase that it is literally neurobiologically impossible to think deeply about something that you don't care about. And I think about that at least once a week, maybe sometimes once a day, because I think of things that I have tried to memorize in my life that I just could not get myself to care about. And I just think about that feeling of hitting a wall, and then think about all of those motivational pieces that Sam and Katie, that you were both just talking about, and like, what that does, like just physiologically inside us, that helps us to push hard and think in a really engaged way.
See, I have done a challenge with a community partner where I had to spread the message out about environmental injustice. Ms. Peters was one of my teachers who helped me during share outs, and helped me gain the courage to present this to the challenge partner. Thank you, Ms. Peters. No, it was also you. Okay, but I was really motivated because I actually cared about this and I wanted to learn more. I wanted to dig in deep. And this was like literally my first challenge here at the master's school. And I was just like, wow, this is what it feels like to actually want to learn something. Like what it is to dig deep on a topic that you actually want to know more about. And I remember all of the research that I did because I actually like care about it.
And I was going to go on to a different book. I think that the community partner is definitely one of the more obvious motivators that we have with the macro program. But I think two others are we work really hard with goal setting, and for students in order to students have the autonomy that we want them to have, like having them set goals and create those goals on their own, it creates another motivation that's more intrinsic than a grade. And I think the other one is all of our macro challenges they're working on teams. So they're learning how to collaborate, and one of those skills is creating responsibilities for each other. And so you have this big responsibility to the community partner, but you also have it to your teammates, and what it feels like to let someone else down is pretty big one. And we talk a lot about, playing to your strengths and making sure everyone knows what their responsibility is, and making sure everyone is interested in what their portion of the project. And I think developing those collaboration skills and those goal setting skills are also hugely important to creating motivation in students.
About you create your own projects in a lot of your classes, and more so in like the micro program, and that does feel weird at first. It took me pretty much it's still happening actually. I won't say it took me. It feels like really weird to say, this is my goal. I am now going to design basically a class that will allow me to reach it, and it feels off like for a first couple of months, and then sort of like it slowly turns into something that you're good with and that you understand. So like just recently I had been practicing just recently. I mean today, it was today. I was working on like a program that I was working on with a classmate about using Python and learning like how Python can be used to separate and categorize different instances, and then how it can actually solve issues for it. And so that was sort of like one of the things I can point to and be like, yes, this is like something I designed the process, I designed the class, I designed the goal, and I've learned something, I've achieved something, and I can point to that. It doesn't always look like that, and especially at the beginning, it was much more loose. I made much more loose goals, I made much more like loose ways for me to learn. And I think like part of like the first year here is less about learning very specific things and more about learning in the way that you can create ways for you to learn. And that I just said like a lot of words, a lot of times there, but basically a lot of what you learn in your micro projects and in your growth projects are, how can I create something that will enable me to learn, and how can I create something that will enable me to succeed? And that is a very drastic shift from anything I'd done before, and took a while to actually get used to.
I think to add on to that, sorry. I think to add on to that is, the goal setting, the responsibility to others, the responsibility to deadlines and major players in society is really what happens when you enter the real world. So it gives students skills that they're ultimately going to need, and that gives them motivations and checks on their responsibilities that are much more like the real world. Sorry.
When I think too, from the faculty perspective about the times where I see students expanding, I think about all the moments so far in my short mastery school career, because it's only been open a year and a half. But I think about, I can't count on two hands the number of times that students have lit up when they realize that they have permission to think differently or think big about something that they're doing. And I think to your point, Sam, I think when you're first starting off, you're still like being real safe about it, right? It's like, well, what do you want, teacher? And then you figure out that we're not going to give that to you. And then the question is, okay, well, if you won't tell me what you want, I have to start figuring things out. And at first, it's not easy. But then as you move through and things start to unlock, you're like, oh, so I can go and research confirmation bias to figure out how to create this app that does this. And it's like, yeah, you can. And you see students light up in a way that you can't. It's not that it doesn't happen in other spaces or can't happen in other spaces, but it happens so much here that you just know you're onto something with it.
So one of my projects in my macro was, I keep going back to my macros, but we had an interlude project where it was all about our cultural context, because I have the macro cultural context. And so for the first portion of the project, I made a video, and it was generally very safe because of the fact that everyone else was thinking of doing a video. And then, it was about me doing makeup and my view of myself and how I know that I'm beautiful and all of that sort of thing. And then the second portion of the project, I was just like, hold on, it's a physical thing, but we can do anything. Hold on. It would literally, it was just like, make a 3D version of your identity. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna make a dress. And so I did that. And I was and I was just like, that was nice. I literally learned how to do that, and I figured out how it would express me. And so that was just a window into how this school works, because I was just first coming in here, I was just like, oh cool, project-based learning. And now I'm just like, wait, I had to design my own projects. That's weird. And so now I'm just like, I can do my own thing, and it's cool.
Yeah, I think that, oh, sorry. I think that process, that experience that you're describing, and then what that muscle gets to be over time as you get to keep doing that, is one of the most powerful things that we could help you, if we in your 3 or 4 years here at the mastery school could help you develop something that you get to take away that's a pretty powerful one. I think that idea that you can, in a situation, set a goal, ask questions, understand the constraints, understand the context, whatever it is that you might be doing, and then be able to pursue that and have plans and confidence that you've done this before and you can do it again. I don't know. I just think about all the research about what it takes for students to persist in college, and what those skills are that you need to have just internalized. So you don't have to worry or think about it, but you have it in the bag. And it seems to me that a lot of that practice is just an incredibly powerful one.
I think that's a great note to finish off our portion of this. And now we are happy to open this up to any questions that those of you watching or listening might have. You can put your questions in the chat. Yeah, and we'll be able to read them off. So we'll give folks a minute to maybe indulge us. And maybe in the meantime, though, I would love to ask the students, so you talked about some of the beautiful moments. Were there moments, or was there a moment that you can think about where you really felt challenged in this and where you can identify what you had to access in order to get through? I think you talked a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if there are things that just related to expanding your learning experiences, things that you had to push through and what that looks like for you.
I had to, in the first challenge, I had to figure out research, like what kind of research I would do. And usually teachers give us research to research. They like give us websites to like to research. It's not true research because like they're just like, you could have just lectured us and we would have gotten the same information. But we had to figure out our own lanes of research. We got to figure out our own project. And I was just like, how would I do this? And me and my team were just like, so we're gonna figure out this, this, and this. And it was such an interesting experience trying to go through it because we knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't know the research to back it up. And you helped me figure out some of the research with you and Mr. Placido. And so that was one of the times where I genuinely like felt challenged in a way that I hadn't been in my previous public school years.
I would talk about like the end goal, right? Because there's been a couple of times I could name them, but like it would be a list and a long list. And so in my mind, like, you know, if something's going poorly, you have to do it still. And that's like that's the roughest bit because and the bit that you have to learn the most from because you know, in my past, like, you know, before I came to school, if I got a bad test grade, I would feel really bad about it. And then I would think, and maybe there's a redo. Maybe I did a redo and maybe that helped me feel it. But at the end of the day, like I didn't do anything about it. Like that was something I failed. And that is something that never happens here. You never like fail in that sense. So now if I do something that's like, there aren't tests here, but if there was a test and I did do poorly on it, I wouldn't have said I failed. I would have said it was something that I need to work on. And whenever I have a project and it's going poorly, I actually originally I did think I failed. And that's a point where I learned that that's not something that is useful. And it's not something that's true either. You never really like fail unless you choose to. And if you're in a project, and sorry, that sounds like really like, you know, preachy and like not true, but I promise you, like it's a shift in my mentality that is real, and is something that I think about and I think is true. And I think that the shift between this project isn't going well, I hate this, I'm going to cry, and this project isn't going well, what do I need to change? That's like been the biggest point of you know, learning, and also the biggest point of distress.
Was that a mic drop? And then you said distress. But I think we're gonna wrap it here. Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you so much for your thoughts on rigor motivation at the mastery school.